The sound of splintering wood tore me from sleep at exactly 2 in the morning. I sat up, heart hammering, to see my father framed in the ruin of my doorframe. His face flushed and terrifying. He didn't ask. He barked at me to pack my life and get out right now. I was 33, not a child, but as I saw the panic beneath his rage, I realized this wasn't an eviction. It was a cover-up. The sound was not a knock. It was a violent, splintering crash that tore the frame of reality right down the middle. I jolted upward in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The darkness of the room was shattered by the hallway light pouring in through the ruin of my bedroom doorway. Wood chips littered the floor. Dust motes danced in the sudden, aggressive beam of artificial light. Standing in the debris was my father. He looked insane. That was the first, unbidden thought that crossed my mind as I clutched the quilt to my chest. He was 62 years old, a man who prided himself on Sunday suits and a lawn manicured to the millimeter. But the man standing there panting for breath was a stranger. His face was a blotchy, hypertensive red, the veins in his neck standing out like cords. "Get up," he shouted. His voice cracked, high and thin with a panic I had never heard before. "Pack your things. Give me the room. Now." I blinked, the sleep still heavy behind my eyes, trying to process the data in front of me. It was 2 in the morning. The digital clock on my nightstand burned the red numbers into the dark. 200. "Dad," I said, my voice thick. "What are you talking about?" "Right now." "Claire." He did not step into the room. He stood on the threshold as if the carpet were lava, vibrating with a kinetic energy that terrified me. "You need to get your things and get out. I need this room empty." I reached for the lamp switch, flooding my side of the room with soft yellow light. It did not make the scene any less nightmarish. It only highlighted the details. My father was wearing a dress shirt, but it was inside out. The seams ran along his shoulders like scars, and the tag stuck up by his neck. He had not dressed for the day. He had dressed in the dark, in a frenzy, and his hands, I focused on his hands gripping the broken doorframe. The knuckles were raw, scraped bloody, as if he had been digging in gravel or climbing a rough wall. There was dirt under his fingernails. Something was wrong. This was not a drunk rage. My father barely drank. This was not a standard family argument about rent or lifestyle. I was 33 years old. I had moved back in 6 months ago after my life in the city imploded. A temporary stopgap while I rebuilt my savings. We had rules. We had a rhythm. This was a demolition of all of that. "I am not moving," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady, despite the tremors starting in my hands. "It is 2 in the morning. "You just broke my door. I do not have time to argue with you," he screamed, and he actually stomped his foot, a childish, frantic motion that sent a fresh wave of fear through me. "Just pack the bag, and go." My instinct shifted. The initial shock of violence gave way to a cold, survivalist clarity. I had spent 10 years in corporate logistics before my layoff. I knew how to read a room when a deal was going south. This was a deal going south. I slid my hand under my pillow, finding the cool glass of my smartphone. I did not bring it up to my ear. I kept it flat against the mattress, my thumb tracing the pattern to unlock it, then tapping the voice memo icon. I hit record and slid the phone just beneath the edge of the duvet. "I am recording," I told myself. "Whatever happens next, I need proof." I swung my legs out of bed. "I am putting on my robe," I said, narrating my actions calmly to de-escalate him. "I am going to stand up. Move faster." He spat. I stood, tying the sash of my robe tight around my waist. "Why, Dad?" I asked. "Why do I need to leave at 2 in the morning?" "Because I said so." "That is not a reason." Then a new figure appeared in the hallway light. My stepmother drifted into view behind him. She looked entirely different. She was fully dressed in a crisp beige cardigan and slacks, her hair brushed and pinned back. She held a folded sheet of paper in her hand, gripping it the way a choir singer holds a hymnal. She did not look at the broken door. She did not look at my father's bleeding hands or his inside-out shirt. She looked directly at me, her expression flat, devoid of the usual performative warmth she reserved for Sunday dinners. "Eleanor," I said, "what is going on?" She did not blink. "This is happening tonight." "Claire." Her voice was ice water. It was final. It sounded rehearsed, like a line delivered from a script she had memorized hours ago. I looked between them. The frantic, sweating man and the cold, composed woman. They were a team, playing a good cop, bad cop routine where both cops wanted me gone. I am not leaving without an explanation. I said, crossing my arms, "I pay rent. We have an agreement. You cannot just kick the door down and throw me out. It is illegal." My father let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Illegal? You think I care about that right now?" "The house needs to look right by morning." The phrase struck me. The house needs to look right. Look right for who? I asked. "Just pack." He lunged forward, grabbing a duffel bag from the top of my closet and throwing it at my feet. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. "Fill it. Anything left behind goes in the trash." I looked at the bag. Then I looked at him. I could fight. I could scream. I could call the police. But if I called the police, they would see a domestic dispute. They would see a father and a daughter arguing in a house the father owned. They might separate us, but they would not solve the mystery of why his shirt was inside out, or why Eleanor was holding that paper like a weapon. And I realized I did not want to stay. The room felt contaminated. The safety I thought I had found here, the sanctuary of my childhood bedroom where I was healing from my divorce and my job loss, was gone. It had evaporated the moment the wood splintered. "Okay," I said softly. My father blinked, surprised by the sudden capitulation. I said, "Okay, I will go, but I am not doing it because you are screaming. I am doing it because I do not want to be near you right now." I knelt and unzipped the bag. I moved with mechanical efficiency, grabbing handfuls of underwear, socks, jeans. I did not fold. I stuffed. My father hovered in the doorway, watching me like a prison guard. Eleanor stood behind him, checking a watch on her wrist. 5 minutes. Eleanor said, "We are on a schedule, at 2 a.m. I grabbed my toiletry bag from the dresser. I swept my arm across the nightstand, knocking my charger and my wallet into the duffel. I reached under the duvet and retrieved my phone, checking to ensure the recording was still running. It was. The red waveform pulsed with every rustle of fabric. I stood up, slinging the heavy bag over my shoulder. "I need to use the bathroom." I said, "Make it fast," my father snapped. I pushed past him. He smelled of metallic sweat and old copper coins. I stepped into the hallway and the sensory details of the house hit me harder than the sight of the broken door. The hallway floor was gritty. I looked down. My bare feet were stepping on a fine layer of white dust. I frowned. I had vacuumed this hallway yesterday morning. It had been spotless. I looked closer at the floorboards near the baseboard. There, clearly defined in the white dust, was the tread of a heavy boot, a work boot, a size 12, maybe larger. My father wore loafers. These were lug soles, caked with dry mud that had crumbled onto the carpet runner. Someone else had been here. Recently, I walked toward the bathroom, but my eyes darted to the doorframe of the guest room, the room next to mine. There was a smear of color on the white trim. I paused, pretending to adjust the strap of my bag, and touched it. Wet paint. I rubbed the pigment between my fingers. It was a soft, neutral grayga, the kind of color you see in hotel lobbies. The smell hit me then, cutting through the scent of my father's panic, the sharp, chemical tang of fresh latex paint. They had been painting the guest room. In the middle of the night, I went into the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and stared at myself in the mirror. My eyes were wide, the pupils dilated. I looked terrified. I forced myself to breathe. Boot prints, wet paint, a schedule. This was a renovation, a rapid, overnight renovation. I walked out of the bathroom. I did not go back to my room. I walked toward the kitchen. "Claire, where are you going?" Eleanor's voice was sharp. "The front door is that way. I need water." I lied. I walked into the kitchen. The overhead lights were off. but the room was bathed in the blue glow of a laptop screen sitting open on the island. My father never used the laptop in the kitchen. He was a desktop man, sequestered in his study. I walked past the island, slowing down just enough to read the screen. It was a draft page for a real estate listing website. The header image was blank, a gray placeholder box, but the text was there. Charming coastal colonial, immaculate condition, immediate occupancy, and below that, in bold red text, pre-market photography. Scheduled, today, 8:00 a.m. My breath hitched. They were selling the house. They were selling the house, and the photographer was coming in 6 hours. That was why my room had to be empty. That was why the door was kicked down. My clutter, my presence, my life, it was an eyesore. It was an obstacle to a photo that needed to look like a blank slate. I felt a wave of nausea. It wasn't just that they were kicking me out, it was that they had planned it. They had hired painters. They had drafted the listing. They had done all of this while I was sleeping down the hall, eating dinner with them, washing my dishes in this very sink. Claire. The voice came from the back door. I turned. My brother stood in the mudroom entrance. He was wearing a hoodie with the hood pulled up, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. He looked exhausted. His eyes were rimmed with red, and he was chewing on his lower lip, a nervous tic he had not had since high school. "You knew?" I asked him. The betrayal felt sharper coming from him. He was the one who told me to move back home. He was the one who said Mom would have wanted me to be safe. He did not look at me. He looked at the floor, at the same dust I had seen in the hallway. "Just do it, please," he murmured. His voice was barely a whisper. "Do what?" I asked, stepping closer. "Leave? You are okay with this?" He looked up then, and I expected to see anger or annoyance. Instead, I saw sheer, unadulterated terror. He looked like a trapped animal. "Claire, just go," he said, his voice trembling. "You do not understand. Just get in your car and go. Please." It was the please that stopped me. It sounded like a beg for mercy. My father came into the kitchen then, breathing hard. "Why are you still here?" He looked at my brother. "Did you get the keys back?" My brother flinched. "Dad, stop! Keys!" my father shouted at me. "House keys! Now!" I reached into my pocket, my hand shaking with a rage that was finally overtaking the fear. I pulled out the key ring with the little brass key that opened the front door, the key I had worn around my neck when I was 10. I slammed it onto the granite island. The sound rang out like a gunshot. "There," I said. I looked at the three of them. My father, vibrating with a panic I could not understand. My stepmother, cold and calculation personified. My brother, broken and terrified. "I hope it is worth it," I said, "whatever this is." I turned and walked out the front door. The night air was shocking, damp and salty from the ocean. The street was quiet. The suburban silence felt like a lie after the chaos inside. I walked to my car, a beat-up sedan parked in the driveway. I threw my duffel bag into the passenger seat. I did not get in immediately. I stood by the door, my hand on the handle, looking back at the house. The lights were on in every room on the ground floor. Shadows moved frantically past the windows. They were already working, erasing me. I looked down the street, 3 houses down. Parked under the heavy canopy of an oak tree was a white van. It was indistinguishable from 1,000 other work vans, except for the logo on the side. Apex Solutions. Rapid renovations, staging. It looked cheap. A magnetic decal slapped onto the side of a rusted vehicle, but what caught my eye was the dashboard. The street lamp above cast just enough light through the windshield to show a clipboard resting on the dash, and next to the clipboard, a pair of boots. Muddy boots. The driver was not in the van. The driver was inside my house. I got into my car. I locked the doors. My hands were trembling so badly I had to use both of them to turn the ignition. The engine sputtered to life. I backed out of the driveway, my headlights sweeping across the lawn that my father loved more than he loved me. I put the car in drive and drove. I did not speed. I drove at exactly the speed limit. watching the rearview mirror, half expecting the white van to turn on its lights and follow me. It did not move. I drove until the houses gave way to strip malls, and the strip malls gave way to the highway. I pulled into the lot of a 24-hour diner that sat like a beacon of grease and loneliness on the edge of town. I went inside. The fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. The place was empty except for a trucker asleep in a back booth, and a waitress who looked like she had seen everything and was impressed by none of it. "Coffee," I said. "Black." She nodded and poured. I wrapped my hands around the ceramic mug, trying to siphon the heat into my frozen fingers. I took a sip. It was bitter and burnt. It tasted like reality. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I stared at the screen. The recording had run for 12 minutes. 12 minutes to dismantle a life. I plugged in my earbuds. I needed to hear it again. I needed to know if I had imagined the terror in my brother's eyes or the inside-out shirt on my father's back. I pressed play. The sounds of the night came rushing back. The splintering wood. The shouting. "Pack your things. Give me the room." I closed my eyes, listening to the background noise, the silence between the shouts. I fast-forwarded to the end, to the moment I was leaving the room, the moment I was in the hallway, staring at the boot prints, on the recording. The rustling of my duffel bag masked some of the audio, but then, distinct and clear, came my father's voice. He must have thought I was out of earshot, or perhaps he was speaking to Eleanor. The audio was slightly muffled, as if he had turned away from the phone hidden under the duvet, but the words cut through the diner noise like a knife. "If we do not fix this tonight, we lose everything tomorrow." I paused the track. I rewound it. I played it again. "If we do not fix this tonight, we lose everything tomorrow." The tone was not anger. It was desperation. It was the voice of a man standing on a ledge, looking down at the fall. I took the earbuds out. I stared at the dark window of the diner, seeing my own reflection superimposed over the empty parking lot. We lose everything. Not we lose the sale. Not we lose a profit. We lose everything. My father was a man of assets. He had the house, a pension, a small portfolio of investments. He was risk-averse. He double-checked receipts for groceries. He did not gamble. So what could possibly threaten everything in the span of 24 hours? I thought about the boot prints, the rush, the paint, the real estate listing that was poised to go live at 8 in the morning. They were trying to hide something. The house was the cover, the sale was the exit strategy, and I was the loose thread. I looked at the duffel bag sitting on the bench seat opposite me. It contained 3 pairs of jeans, a week's worth of socks, and my toothbrush. That was all they had left me with. They wanted me to be a victim. They wanted me to cry, to drive to a motel, to fade away so they could execute whatever desperate plan they had hatched. My hand tightened around the phone. I was not going to fade away. I was not going to beg for my room back. I did not want the room. I wanted the truth. I opened the calendar app on my phone. I typed in the date. Then I typed a single entry for 8 in the morning. Find out what tomorrow means. I took a sip of the cold coffee. My hands had stopped shaking. The fear was still there, sitting heavy in my gut, but it was being calcified by something stronger. Curiosity, and a very specific, very cold anger. "You want to erase me?" I thought, looking at the digital recording file. "You should have checked my phone first." I paid for the coffee with a $5 bill and walked back out to my car. I reclined the driver's seat. I would not sleep, but I would wait. The sun would be up in 4 hours, and when it rose, I would be watching. The sun was up, but it offered no warmth. The coastal morning was gray, draped in a heavy marine layer that clung to the windshield of my car as I turned back onto the street I had called home for the last 6 months. It was 8 in the morning, the deadline. I had spent the hours between 2 and 8 parked in the diner lot, watching the sky lighten from charcoal to a bruised purple, then to this flat, unresponsive slate. I had not slept. My eyes felt gritty, lined with sand, and my body hummed with a caffeine jitter that was indistinguishable from adrenaline. I pulled into the driveway. The contractor van was gone. The house looked pristine. The front lawn was freshly mowed. Someone must have done it at dawn, and the windows gleamed. It looked like the perfect American home, the kind you saw in brochures for retirement planning. It looked like a lie. I grabbed my keys from the ignition. I walked up the slate path, my boots clicking rhythmically. I reached the front door, the heavy oak slab I had walked through 1,000 times. I inserted my key into the lock. It did not turn. I frowned, jiggling it. Sometimes the tumbler stuck in the humidity. I pulled it out, wiped it on my jeans, and tried again. I applied pressure, twisting my wrist. Nothing. It was a solid, unyielding resistance. I crouched down, peering at the hardware. The metal surrounding the keyhole was shiny, unmarred by the scratches of years of use. It smelled faintly of machine oil. They had changed the locks, in the middle of the night, while I sat in a diner drinking burnt coffee. A locksmith had come here, or perhaps the contractor had done it. I stood up, a flush of heat rising up my neck. I raised my hand and knocked, hard, 3 sharp raps that echoed against the wood. Silence. I knocked again. "Eleanor! Dad! Open the door!" I heard footsteps. They were soft, hesitant. They stopped just on the other side of the wood. I could sense someone standing there, looking through the peephole. Claire. It was Eleanor. Her voice was muffled, filtered through 2 inches of oak. It lacked the imperious edge it had carried last night. Now, it sounded detached, like a receptionist telling a client the doctor was unavailable. "Open the door." "Eleanor," I said, keeping my voice level. "My key does not work." "I know," she said. There was a pause. I waited for her to unlock it. She did not. "You are not coming in." "Claire," she said. "Not today." I stared at the wood grain, tracing the swirls with my eyes. "I live here. Eleanor, my furniture is in there. My files. My winter coat. You cannot just lock me out. We packed the rest of your things," she said. "The boxes are in the garage. I will open the garage door for you remotely. You can take them and go." "This is illegal," I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts. "You have to give me 30 days' notice. You cannot just change the locks at dawn." "Please do not make a scene," she said. Her voice was infuriatingly calm. "The neighbors are watching. We will sort out the rest later. Right now, the house needs to be empty." "Empty for who?" I demanded. "For the photographer? For the buyer?" There was no answer. I heard the soft slide of her footsteps retreating. "Eleanor!" I slapped my palm against the door. "Eleanor!" The heavy mechanism of the garage door groaned to life to my left. The white aluminum door began to roll up slowly, revealing the concrete bay where my father usually parked his sedan. There, sitting in the center of the empty garage, were 3 cardboard boxes. They were taped shut with aggressive layers of clear packing tape. My life, condensed and expelled. I walked over to them. I did not take them. I stood in the driveway, exposed to the street. I could feel the eyes of the neighborhood on me. Mrs. Gable across the street was pausing in her gardening. The mail carrier was slowing his truck. If I screamed, if I threw a rock through the window, I would be the crazy daughter. I would be the unstable woman my father had likely painted me as to explain this sudden departure. Claire is having a hard time. Claire needs space. I took a deep breath, inhaling the salt air. I stepped back. I retreated. I walked to my car, got in, and locked the door. I did not load the boxes. Leaving them there was a statement. It said, "I am not moving out. I am being forced out." I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were steady now. The shock had burned off, leaving behind a cold, crystalline focus. I opened a new text message addressed to my father. "I am locked out. My key does not work. I require a written explanation for why I have been evicted without notice, and when I will be granted access to my primary residence. If I do not receive a response, I will involve authorities." I hit send. I watched the house. Nothing moved. The curtains remained drawn. 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was not a text. It was an email notification. My father avoided texts for serious matters. He preferred the paper trail of email. Or so he thought. I opened the message. The subject line was simply, "Update, Claire, we are undergoing a necessary household restructuring that requires immediate vacancy of the property. This is a private family matter involving boundaries that have been crossed. We will discuss your tenancy status at a later date. Your belongings have been made available to you. Please respect our privacy during this transition. Dad. I read it twice. Household restructuring. Boundaries. It read like a corporate press release for a layoff. It was devoid of emotion. Devoid of the panic I had seen in his eyes last night. It was a shield. He was hiding behind formal language because the truth was too dangerous to type. I started the car. I needed a base of operations. I could not fight this from the driver's seat of a sedan. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Maya. Maya had been my roommate in college, a woman who possessed a sharp tongue and a guest room she rarely used. I dialed. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, you," she said, her voice bright. "You are up early. I need a favor." I said, "A big one." My voice must have sounded wrong, because her tone dropped instantly. "What happened?" "My father kicked me out." I said, "Last night, at 2 a.m? He changed the locks." There was a beat of silence. "He did what?" "I need a place to crash. Maya. Just for a few nights. Until I figure out what is going on." "Come over," she said immediately. "I will leave the key under the mat. I have to get to the hospital for my shift. But the house is yours. Claire? Yeah? Are you okay?" I looked at the house one last time. The perfect lawn, the silent windows, the fortress that held secrets I was just beginning to sense. "No," I said honestly. "I am humiliated, and I am furious, but I am clear-headed." "Good," she said. "Furious gets things done." I did not go straight to Maya's. I had to go to work. I worked as a logistics coordinator for a mid-sized shipping firm on the edge of town. It was a job of spreadsheets, timelines, and tracking numbers. Usually, I found the orderliness of it soothing. Today, it felt like I was moving through gelatin. I sat at my desk, staring at a manifest for a shipment of auto parts bound for Charleston. The numbers swam before my eyes. My clothes, the same jeans and sweater I had thrown on at 2 a.m., felt stale. I felt dirty, marked by the eviction. I went to the break room for coffee. The fluorescent lights buzzed, a familiar annoyance that today felt like a drill boring into my skull. "Hey, Claire." I turned. It was Jim, one of the dispatchers. He was a nice guy, a local who knew everyone and everything in town. He was stirring sugar into a mug that said, "World's okayest golfer." "Hey, Jim," I said, forcing a smile. "You look tired," he noted, leaning against the counter. "Rough night?" "You have no idea," I murmured. "I actually saw your dad the other day," he said casually. I froze. The mug stopped halfway to my mouth. "You did?" "Yeah, down at the county building. I was there trying to get a permit for my deck. Total nightmare, by the way, and I saw him at the counter." "When was this?" I asked. "Tuesday? Maybe? Yeah, Tuesday morning. That was 2 days ago." "Was he—" I hesitated, trying to frame the question carefully. "Did he seem okay?" Jim laughed. A short, sharp sound. He seemed pissed. Honestly, he was arguing with the clerk, loudly. Something about a rush fee? I did not catch it all. But he was waving a folder around like he was trying to swat a fly. I thought about saying hi, but he looked like he was on a warpath. A rush fee, arguing at the permit office, it connected, the boot prints in the hallway, the wet paint, the sudden need to have the house look right by morning. "Thanks, Jim," I said. "He has been stressed lately." I walked back to my desk, but I did not look at the shipping manifest. I opened a new browser tab. I typed in the URL for the town's public records database. It was a clunky, outdated website that looked like it had been built in the late 90s. But it was functional. I selected building permits. I typed in my father's address. The screen refreshed. There was a list of historical permits, a roof replacement from 10 years ago, a fence permit from 5 years ago, and one new entry, permit 2025-449. Application date, December 21st, 2025. That was 3 days ago. Type, Interior remodel, staging preparation. Applicant, Eleanor Ward. Contractor, Apex Solutions. I stared at the screen. Eleanor had filed the permit. Not my father. Eleanor, who usually deferred all home maintenance issues to him, and the contractor, Apex Solutions, the name on the van I had seen parked down the street. I clicked on the permit details. The scope of work was vague. Cosmetic updates, non-structural, fast-track staging, but it was the email address listed for the contractor contact that made me pause. It was not a corporate domain. It was a generic Gmail account. Apex Reno Verify Gmail.com. I checked the business license database next. I searched for Apex Solutions. Nothing. No results found in the county registry. I sat back in my chair, a contractor with no local license, doing work on a rush permit filed by my stepmother, for a renovation that required me to be evicted in the middle of the night. I looked at the clock. It was 11:30. I stood up. I grabbed my purse. I am taking an early lunch. I told my supervisor as I walked past his office. I did not wait for approval. The county permit office was a drab brick building that smelled of floor wax and stale paper. I took a number ticket from the red dispenser, number 42, and sat on a hard plastic bench. I waited 20 minutes. When my number was called, I walked to the counter. The clerk was a woman with graying hair and glasses on a chain, surrounded by stacks of blueprints. "Hi," I said, putting on my most polite, confused daughter voice. "I am checking on a permit for my parents' house. They seem to be confused about the inspection time, and I'm just trying to help them coordinate." "Address?" she asked, not looking up. I gave it to her. She typed it in, her long fingernails clicking on the keyboard. She squinted at the screen. "Ward?" she asked. "Yes, Eleanor and Robert Ward. I see the permit here," she said. "Interior staging. We have a final walkthrough scheduled." "When is that?" I asked, holding my breath. She scrolled down. "Tomorrow. Between 8 and 10 in the morning. Tomorrow." That word again. If we do not fix this tonight, we lose everything tomorrow. Tomorrow was Friday. Why was a walkthrough so critical that my father was willing to destroy our relationship to ensure it happened? "Is this a standard inspection?" I asked innocently. "Just checking the electrical and that sort of thing?" The clerk finally looked at me. Her eyes were sharp behind the lenses. "No, honey, this is not a city code inspection. This is a third-party verification. It is tied to the lender." "The lender?" She turned the screen slightly so I could not see it, realizing perhaps she had said too much. The notes say, "Lender final walkthrough, asset verification." That is all I can tell you. If you are not the applicant, I cannot give you the specifics. Asset verification. Thank you. I said, "That is very helpful." I walked out of the building, the sun glaring off the asphalt parking lot. The house was not just being sold, it was being used. Asset verification meant someone was coming to check that the collateral was worth what they said it was. My father was borrowing money. A lot of it, and he needed the house to look perfect, and perfectly empty, to get it. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text from my brother. "Toby, can we talk?" I stared at the message. Toby, who had looked at the floor while my father screamed. Toby, who had whispered, "Just do it, please." I typed back. "Coffee shop on 4th, 20 minutes. If you are not there, I am coming to your office." Toby was already there when I arrived. He was sitting at a small corner table, hunched over a cold brew that was sweating onto the wood. He looked worse than he had last night. His skin was sallow, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of weeks, not days, of stress. I sat down opposite him. I did not get a coffee. I folded my hands on the table. "Talk," I said. He flinched. "Claire, I am so sorry about last night. It was a nightmare." "It was not a nightmare, Toby. It was a planned eviction. Dad had a script. Eleanor had a permit. You knew about it." He looked down at his cup. "I didn't know he was going to kick the door down. I thought he was just going to ask you to leave for a few days." "Why?" I asked. "Why do I need to leave?" He rubbed his face with both hands. "It is complicated. Make it simple." He looked around the coffee shop. Paranoid. It is the business. Claire, the new development project? The one I told you about? I nodded. Toby had been trying to launch his own real estate development firm for 2 years. He was always chasing the big break, the deal that would put him on the map. It went sideways. He whispered, "We hit a snag with the zoning, and the investors got cold feet. They pulled out. But I had already sunk everything into the land purchase. I was drowning. And Dad stepped in. He said he would help me float it until I could find new backing. But he didn't have the cash liquid, so he had to leverage the house." I stared at him. "He mortgaged the house? The house is paid off, Toby." "Mom and Dad paid it off 10 years ago." He winced. "Not a mortgage. It is a bridge loan." The words hung in the air between us. A bridge loan? Short-term. High-interest financing, usually used by developers or desperate people who need cash fast, and promise to pay it back within months. It was risky. It was aggressive. "He took out a bridge loan on the family home to fund your failing project?" I asked, my voice rising. "It is not failing," Toby hissed. "It is just stalled. The loan is just for 6 months. I have a new investor lined up, but they need to see that the assets are clean. They need to see that the collateral, the house, is pristine. So the lender is coming tomorrow?" I asked. He nodded miserably. "The private lender. They are hard money guys. Claire, they do not mess around. They require a vacancy clause. They said if the property is occupied by anyone other than the title holders, they won't fund. So I am a tenant," I said flatly, "and tenants complicate the deal." "Exactly. Dad was terrified that if they saw your room, saw that you were living there permanently, they would deny the loan. And if they deny the loan, we lose everything tomorrow." I finished for him. He looked up, surprised. "Yeah. How did you know?" "Because Dad said it." I leaned back in my chair. The pieces were fitting together, but the picture was ugly. My father was gambling the house, my mother's house, on my brother's pipe dream, and to do it, he had to erase me. But something still didn't fit. Why the inside-out shirt? "Toby?" I asked. "Why the panic? If this is just a loan closing, why was Dad shaking like he had seen a ghost?" Toby looked away. "He is just stressed. The interest rate on this loan is high. If we miss the funding window tomorrow, the whole deal collapses, and I lose the land. He is just trying to save me." "You are lying," I said softly. He looked back at me, hurt. "I am telling you the truth about the loan. You are telling me part of the truth. You are leaving out the part that explains the fear. Dad does not panic over interest rates. Dad panics over consequences." I stood up. "I am going to find out what you are not telling me. Toby, Claire, please, just let it go. Let the inspection happen tomorrow. Once the loan funds, you can move back in. I swear." I looked at my brother, the weak link. He was drowning, and he was pulling all of us down with him. "I cannot move back in." "Toby, you guys broke the door." I walked out of the coffee shop. I felt a vibration of danger that had nothing to do with real estate and everything to do with the people my brother had gotten involved with. Hard money, guys. Apex Solutions. I drove to Maya's house. She was still at work, but the key was under the mat as promised. I let myself in. The house smelled of lavender and peace. It was so different from the chaotic energy of my father's house. I went into the guest room, sat on the bed, and opened my laptop. I needed to dig. Toby had mentioned a bridge loan. He said Dad leveraged the house. I logged into my cloud storage. I had a folder labeled Family Docs, scans of birth certificates, passports, old tax returns. I was the organized one. I was the one who digitized everything after Mom died because Dad couldn't handle the paperwork. I scrolled through the files, looking for anything related to the house title. I found the deed. Robert and Martha Ward. Clear title. No liens as of 3 years ago. Then I saw a file I had forgotten about. It was labeled Utility Cosign 2021.ef. I clicked on it. It was a document from 4 years ago. My father had called me, sounding annoyed, saying the electric company was giving him grief about an account transfer after Mom died. He asked if I would co-sign just to get the bureaucracy off his back. I had done it without thinking. It was Dad. I opened the PDF. It was not a utility bill. I zoomed in on the fine print. The header was nondescript. Service agreement, liability, waiver. But the entity listed at the top wasn't the power company. It was North Star Holdings, LLC. I scrolled to the signature page. There was my signature. Electronic and verified. And there was my father's. I read the clause above my signature. The undersigned acting as secondary guarantor acknowledges joint liability for any outstanding balances associated with account 88904. I frowned. Secondary guarantor? For a utility? I copied the name North Star Holdings, LLC and pasted it into a search engine. The results were sparse. A registered agent address in Delaware, no website, no customer service number. I went to a business credit check site, one I had access to through my work login. I ran the name, North Star Holdings, LLC, industry, high-risk financial services, asset recovery. It was a debt collection agency, or a shell company for one. My blood ran cold. 4 years ago, my father hadn't asked me to co-sign a utility bill. He had asked me to co-sign a debt repayment plan. He had been in trouble for years, long before Toby's land deal. I sat back, the laptop burning my thighs. My father, the conservative, risk-averse man, had been hiding a financial bleed for at least 4 years, and he had tricked me into attaching my name to it. The bridge loan Toby was talking about. It wasn't to fund a new project. It was to pay off the old sharks before they ate him alive. The house was not just collateral. It was the only thing standing between him and ruin. I closed the laptop. My head was spinning. I needed to know who Apex Solutions really was. The contractor, the one helping them stage the lie. I pulled up the permit information again on my phone. I took the address listed for Apex Solutions, 4500 Commerce Way, Suite 102. I grabbed my keys. Commerce Way was a strip of industrial parks and fast food chains on the west side of town. I found number 4500 easily enough. It was a beige stucco building nestled between a tire shop and a discount mattress warehouse. I parked across the street and looked at Suite 102. It was not a contractor's office. There were no trucks, no lumber, no guys in hard hats. The sign above the door read, "The Mailbox Store." More. It was a shipping center. Suite 102 was just a rental box. I stared at the storefront. Apex Solutions did not exist. It was a ghost. So who was inside my house? Who was painting the walls? Who had left those boot prints? It wasn't a contractor. I thought about the lender walkthrough scheduled for tomorrow. If the contractor was fake, and the permit was rushed, and the lender was a hard money group, my father wasn't just getting a loan. He was laundering the house. He was transferring the asset to someone else, under the guise of a refinance, using a fake contractor to justify the movement of funds or the increase in value. And by kicking me out, by erasing my residency, he was removing the only legal obstacle that could stop a seizure. I looked at the mailbox store. A woman walked out carrying a package. Life went on, mundane and normal. But inside my car, the world had shifted. My father was not protecting the family. He was selling us out, and I was the only one who had the pieces to prove it. I put the car in gear. I had one more stop to make before the sun went down. I needed to see exactly what kind of boundaries my father was willing to cross. I was going to find out who was really pulling the strings of Apex Solutions, because tomorrow was coming fast, and I intended to be the one who decided what it brought. The waiting room of the Bayport Legal Aid Clinic smelled of stale coffee and desperation. It was a small, cramped office sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a pawn shop, the kind of place you went when you had run out of money and options. I sat on a folding metal chair, clutching my purse, watching the clock on the wall tick past 10 in the morning. I had never needed a lawyer before. My life had been a series of careful, risk-averse choices designed to keep me out of rooms like this. But as I looked around at the other people waiting, a young mother with a crying toddler, an old man clutching an eviction notice, I realized I was one of them now. I was displaced. When my name was called, I was ushered into a cubicle by a woman named Sarah. She looked younger than me, with tired eyes and a stack of files on her desk that looked like a leaning tower of misery. I explained the situation clearly: the broken door, the 2 in the morning eviction, the changed locks, the withheld property. Sarah listened, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she sighed and took off her glasses. "Here is the reality. Claire," she said, her voice kind but firm, "without a written lease, you are considered a tenant at will. In this state, they technically need to give you 30 days' notice to vacate. What they did, the self-help eviction, as we call it, is illegal. You could sue for wrongful eviction. You could probably win damages." I felt a flicker of hope, but, she continued, holding up a hand, "that takes time. Months. Maybe a year. And it does not get you back into the house tonight. The police will not force them to let you move back in because they view it as a civil matter. They will tell you to take it to court. So I am homeless," I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Legally, you have been displaced," she corrected, "but you have absolute rights to your personal property. They cannot hold your belongings hostage. If you feel unsafe going back alone, or if they are refusing access, you can request a civil standby." "A civil standby?" "You call the non-emergency line. You ask for an officer to escort you to the property to retrieve your essential items. It keeps the peace. It forces the door open." I nodded slowly. It was not a victory, but it was a wedge. It was a way back inside. "Thank you," I said. I walked out of the clinic and into the gray morning light. I did not want to sue my father. I wanted to understand why he had turned into a stranger. But if I had to bring a police officer to my childhood home to get my birth certificate and my winter coat, I would do it. Officer Miller met me at the curb at 1 in the afternoon. He was a large man with a calm, bored demeanor that suggested he had refereed 1,000 domestic disputes. "This is just a retrieval, ma'am," he told me as we walked up the driveway. "We go in. You get your things. We leave. No fighting. No arguing. 10 minutes. "I understand," I said. I rang the doorbell. I did not use my key because I knew it would not work. The door opened. Eleanor stood there. She was wearing an apron, looking for all the world like a grandmother interrupted in the middle of baking cookies. When she saw the uniform, her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a glitch in the matrix, before she smoothed it back into place. "Is everything all right?" "Officer?" she asked, ignoring me completely. "Ms. Ward is here to collect her personal property," Officer Miller said. "I am just here to ensure that happens smoothly." "Of course," Eleanor said, stepping back. "We put some boxes in the garage for her." "I am not here for the boxes in the garage," I said, stepping over the threshold. "I am here for the things in my room. The things you didn't pack." Eleanor's eyes tightened, but she nodded. "Go ahead." I walked through the foyer. The house was silent. The air smelled sharp and chemical, a scent that triggered an immediate headache. It was the smell of fresh paint. I walked down the hallway to my bedroom. The door, the one my father had kicked in, was gone. In its place was a pristine, white 6-panel door. It looked brand new. I turned the handle and pushed it open. I stopped. My room was gone. The walls, which had been a soft, warm cream color yesterday, were now a sterile, clinical gray. My bed was gone. My dresser was gone. The rug I had bought in Morocco was gone. The room was staged. There was a generic air mattress in the center of the room, covered with a white duvet that still showed the creases from the package. There was a folding table in the corner with a vase of fake flowers. The closet door was open, revealing an empty rail. It looked like a hotel room in a budget chain. It looked like no one had ever lived there. I turned to Eleanor, who had followed us. Officer Miller stood in the hallway, thumbs hooked in his belt. "Where is my furniture?" I asked. "Where are my photos?" "We moved everything to storage," Eleanor said smoothly. "We had to paint. You know how your father gets with his allergies. The dust in here was terrible." "Allergies?" I repeated. "He kicked the door down at 2 in the morning because of allergies?" Eleanor smiled. A tight, thin expression. We are getting the house ready for the market. Claire, you know that. We needed a neutral palette. I walked into the room. The paint was not just fresh. It was still tacky in the corners. They had worked through the night and the morning to erase me. I checked the closet, the top shelf, where I kept my shoeboxes of letters and old journals, was empty. My personal papers, I said, my tax returns, my journals. Where are they? Kitchen, Eleanor said. We cleared out the clutter. I brushed past her, my heart pounding. Clutter. That was what I was to them now. I walked into the kitchen. The house was too clean. The counters were gleaming. The personal touches, the magnet collection on the fridge, the bowl of keys, the stack of mail, were all gone. On the kitchen island, there was a single cardboard box labeled Claire, Misk. I opened it. It was a jumble of items thrown in without care. My hairbrush, a stapler, a few books, and at the bottom, a stack of envelopes held together with a rubber band. I picked up the stack. It was my mail. Some of it was recent, from the last week. But as I flipped through the envelopes, I saw dates going back a month. 2 months? Why do you have mail from October? I asked, holding up a utility bill. It must have gotten mixed in, Eleanor said, leaning against the doorframe. She was watching Officer Miller, making sure she looked like the victim of an ungrateful daughter. I flipped through the stack, junk mail, magazines, and then a plain white envelope with a window. It was addressed to me, Claire Ward, but the return address was a P.O. box in Wilmington, Delaware. And the logo in the corner was small and red. Card Services, Delinquency Review. I frowned. I did not have any credit cards based in Delaware. I had one card, and I paid it off every month. I looked at the postmark. It was dated 3 weeks ago. The seal was unbroken, but the edges were worn, as if it had been handled multiple times. I slid the envelope into my pocket. Is there anything else, ma'am? Officer Miller asked, checking his watch. I looked around the kitchen. I felt a desperate need to find something that proved I wasn't crazy. My eyes landed on the kitchen desk, a small nook where Eleanor kept her laptop and household files. The laptop was open. The screen was dark. Having gone to sleep, I need to check the desk. I said, I think I left my passport in the drawer. I walked over to the desk. Eleanor tensed. I saw her take a half step forward, then stop because the officer was watching. I opened the top drawer. It was empty except for a few pens. I closed it. I glanced at the laptop. I reached out and tapped the spacebar. The screen flared to life. It was not password protected. It was open to an email draft. I only had a second to look before Eleanor was there, her hand slamming the lid shut. I thought you said your passport was in the drawer, she snapped. I didn't see it, I said, keeping my face neutral, but I had seen the email. I had seen the recipient line, and I had seen the first sentence. I turned to Officer Miller. I have what I need. We walked out of the house. I carried the box of clutter. Eleanor stood in the doorway, watching us go, her hand resting on the brass knob of the door she had locked against me. I sat in my car around the corner, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I took deep breaths, counting to 4, trying to slow my heart rate. I pulled the envelope from my pocket. Delinquency Review. I tore it open. It was a notice regarding a checking account ending in 4490. Dear Ms. Ward, this letter is to inform you that the account listed above is currently overdrawn in the amount of $4,300. Immediate action is required to avoid reporting to credit bureaus. I stared at the number, 4490. I did not have an account ending in 4490. But I knew who did, or who had. My mother. It was her old personal checking account, the one she used for her antique business before she passed away 5 years ago. I remembered the number because it was her birthday, April 4th, 1990, 4490, after she died. My father and I had gone to the bank. I remembered sitting in the plush office, crying while the banker closed the accounts. My father had told me this account was empty and would be shut down. So why was it overdrawn by $4,000 today? And why was my name on the delinquency notice? I threw the car into gear. I needed to go to the bank. Coastal Heritage Bank was a marble and glass fortress in the center of town. I walked in, clutching the letter. I asked to speak to a branch manager. I was shown into the office of a Mr. Henderson. He was a man in his 50s with a kind face and a tie that was slightly too wide. "How can I help you?" "Ms. Ward?" I placed the letter on his desk. "I received this. I do not recognize this account. I was told this account was closed 5 years ago." He put on his reading glasses and studied the paper. He typed something into his computer. He frowned. "Ah," he said. "I see. What do you see?" "Ms. Ward, I cannot give you the full transaction history without the primary account holder's authorization. That would be your father. Robert Ward." "My father?" I leaned forward. "But the letter is addressed to me." "Yes. You are listed as the secondary contact and beneficiary on the account. But the account was supposed to be closed." I insisted. "Mr. Henderson turned the monitor slightly so he could see it better. "It appears the account was never fully closed. It was converted to a legacy retention account. It remained inactive for 4 years. And then, about 8 months ago, it was reactivated. There have been significant withdrawals. It has a tied overdraft protection line of credit, which has now been maxed out. That is why you are getting the letter. The bank is reaching out to all liable parties." "Liable?" I felt a cold prickle of sweat on my back. I never signed for this. He tapped a few keys. "Actually, the documentation shows you were added as a joint signer on the restructuring of the family accounts 4 years ago. Did you sign a general liability waiver?" I thought back to the PDF I had found on my laptop. The utility cosign, North Star Holdings, service agreement. I signed a document my father gave me. I said slowly, "He told me it was for the electric bill." Mr. Henderson looked at me with a mixture of pity and professional detachment. "Ms. Ward, if your signature is on the restructuring agreement, you are legally responsible for the debt on this account." "How much?" I asked. "Total, not just the overdraft." He hesitated. "I cannot say the exact number without your father present, but the line of credit attached to this account is substantial. $50,000, and it is fully drawn. $50,000. My mother's ghost account. Drained, and my name stamped on the debt." "Thank you," I said. Standing up, my legs felt like lead. I walked out of the bank. The sun was shining, but the world looked dark. My father hadn't just kicked me out. He had stolen my identity. He had used my trust to anchor his debt to my future. I took out my phone. I dialed his number. He picked up on the first ring. "Dad, Claire," he said. His voice sounded weary, stripped of the anger from last night. "Meet me," I said. "Not at the house. The pier. 20 minutes. I don't have time. Claire." "I have—" "If you are not there," I said, cutting him off, "I am going to walk into the police station and file a report for identity theft and fraud regarding Mom's bank account." Silence, then a heavy sigh. 20 minutes. The pier was windy. The ocean churned below the wooden planks, gray and restless. I stood by the railing, watching the seagulls fight over a piece of bread. My father walked up. He looked older than I had ever seen him. The rage was gone, replaced by a gray, hollow look. He was wearing the same jacket he had worn yesterday, and he hadn't shaved. "You look terrible," I said. He leaned against the railing, not looking at me. "I am tired." "Claire, you are tired?" I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. "You kicked my door down. You changed the locks. You stole $50,000 in my name using Mom's debt account. It wasn't stealing," he said quietly. "It was borrowing. It was supposed to be temporary." "Temporary? It has been 8 months. Dad, Mr. Henderson told me." "You have been draining that account for 8 months. I had to," he whispered. "The interest payments. They were eating me alive." "What interest payments?" He waved a hand vaguely. "Business. Investments. Things you don't understand. Try me. I understand that you forged a path to ruin and dragged me onto it. Why the house? Dad? Why kick me out?" He turned to me then, his eyes wet. because I am protecting the family. Claire, can't you see that? Everything I do is to keep a roof over your head. You kicked me out from under that roof, I shouted, not caring who heard. To save it, he shouted back. If I don't get this loan tomorrow, if the lender doesn't sign off, they take it all. They take the house. They take the pension. They take everything. Who is they? I asked. He looked away. He wouldn't say it. North Star Holdings? I guessed. He flinched. How do you know that name? I do my homework. Is that who you owe? It's complicated. It is always complicated with you, I said, disgust rising in my throat. You are not protecting the family. You are protecting yourself. You are protecting your pride because you made bad bets and you don't want anyone to know. I started to walk away. Claire, wait, he pleaded. Just let the inspection happen. Please, don't cause a scene. Once the money comes through, I can pay off the legacy account. I can fix it. I stopped. I looked back at him. You broke the door. Dad, you can't fix a broken door just by painting over it. I left him standing on the pier, a small, shrinking figure against the vast, indifferent ocean. I drove to the construction site where Toby had his office, a trailer sitting in the middle of a muddy lot that was supposed to be a luxury condo complex. I found him inside, staring at a set of blueprints that were curling at the edges. Tell me about the outside pressure. Toby, I said, closing the door behind me. He jumped. Claire, I can't. Dad is falling apart. He admitted he drained Mom's account. He owes $50,000 just on that. How much does he owe on the rest? Toby put his head in his hands. A lot. How much? 200, maybe more. I whistled low. And the bridge loan covers it? The bridge loan is $300,000. It pays off the sharks, gives us operating capital to finish this project, and buys us 6 months to sell the units. It is the only way out. And the lender? The one coming tomorrow? Toby looked up. His face was pale. It is a private equity group, but they are aggressive. They are not a bank. Claire, they are the kind of people who send guys to sit in your driveway. The van. I said, Apex Solutions. Toby nodded. They have been watching the house for a week, checking occupancy. They want to make sure the asset is unencumbered. If they see you living there, an adult dependent with claims to tenancy, they walk. And if they walk, the sharks eat Dad. I finished. And me. Toby whispered. I co-signed the original debt too. I looked at my brother. He was weak. Yes, but he was also trapped. My father had used both of us. He had used Toby's ambition and my trust. So the plan was to erase me, get the cash. And then what? Invite me back? Toby nodded eagerly. Yes, exactly. Dad was going to pay off the legacy account immediately. You would never have known. But I do know, I said, and now I have a choice. Claire, please. Toby stood up, reaching for my hand. Just let it happen. Don't burn it down. I pulled my hand away. I am not the one holding the matches. Toby. I sat in my car outside the public library. I needed Wi-Fi and I needed silence. I opened my laptop. I created a new document. Timeline, 2021. Dad restructures family finances. Tricks me into co-signing liability waiver with North Star Holdings. 2025. October. Legacy account reactivated. Overdraft line maxed out. 2025. Decker 21. Eleanor files permit for staging. Contractor listed as Apex Solutions. Fake. 2025. Decker 23, 2:13 a.m. Eviction. 2025. Decker 24. Civil standby. House staged. Mail found intercepted. I looked at the list. It was a clear narrative of fraud, but there was one piece missing. Eleanor. My stepmother was not a victim here. She was the one who filed the permit. She was the one who intercepted the mail. I typed her name into the search bar. Eleanor Ward Bayport. The results were mostly social. Garden club, charity bake sales. But then I found a PDF of the minutes from a neighborhood association meeting from last month. Attendees: Eleanor Ward, Board Secretary. Agenda Item 4. Fast-track approval process for local renovations. I scrolled down. Eleanor had seconded a motion to waive certain waiting periods for exterior permits for approved vendors. And who was on the list of approved vendors attached to the minutes? It was not Apex Solutions, but it was a company called Vantage Property MGMT. I searched Vantage Property MGMT. The registered address was the same mailbox store as Apex Solutions, Suite 102. Eleanor knew. She wasn't just helping Dad. She was using her position on the board to smooth the way for these shadow companies. She was the logistics manager of the scam. I thought about the email I had seen on the laptop, the one Eleanor had slammed shut. I closed my eyes, trying to summon the image. It had been burnt into my retina by the adrenaline. The recipient was Compliance Secure Lending Group. COM. The subject was Disclosure regarding Occupant C, Ward, and the first line, please find attached the medical summary regarding the former occupant, Claire Ward, as discussed. Her instability and history of delusional episodes pose a risk to. I opened my eyes. Instability, delusional episodes. That was their insurance policy. If I spoke up, if I went to the lender, or the police, or the neighbors, they were ready to paint me as the crazy daughter, the one who imagined things. The one who had to be removed for her own safety. That was why the room was stripped. Not just to hide me, but to erase the evidence that a sane, stable adult lived there. They were not just stealing my money. They were preparing to steal my credibility. I felt a cold, hard knot form in the center of my chest. It was no longer about the room. It was no longer about the money. It was war. I looked at the time. It was 5 p.m. The lender walkthrough was at 8 tomorrow morning. I had 15 hours. I picked up my phone. I dialed the number for the investigative journalist my friend Maya had told me about, the one who hated corruption. It went to voicemail. My name is Claire Ward. I said, I have a story about a community board member, a fraudulent contractor, and a predatory lending scheme involving a local family, and I have the documents to prove it. Call me. I hung up. I started the car. I wasn't going to hide at Maya's tonight. I had work to do. The realization hit me not with a bang, but with the cold, creeping chill of a fog rolling off the ocean. I sat in my car, staring at the gray dashboard. The image of that email draft burned into my mind. Instability, delusional episodes. This was not just about money. If it were only about the money, my father would have begged for a loan or asked me to pay rent. This was about narrative control, to make the numbers work, to satisfy the hard money lenders and the aggressive clauses of a bridge loan. They needed the house to be empty, but I was not empty. I was there. I was a tenant with rights, a daughter with a history. So, to remove the obstacle, they had to destroy the person. If they could label me unreliable, if they could paint my objections as the hysterical rantings of a woman having a breakdown, then my testimony meant nothing. My claims to tenancy would be dismissed as delusions. My father wasn't just stealing my home. He was preparing to gaslight the entire legal system to do it. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and angry. I wiped it away with the back of my hand. No, I whispered to the empty car. You do not get to cry. You get to work. I needed a new strategy. Confrontation had failed. My father was cornered, and a cornered animal bites. If I kept pushing, he would only entrench himself further in the lie that I was unstable. I needed to pivot. I needed to play the role they had written for me, defeated, confused, but ultimately compliant, so that they would lower their shields. I picked up my phone. I dialed my father. He answered on the third ring. His voice was guarded. Claire, Dad. I said. I let my voice crack, pitching it lower, softer. I sounded tired. I sounded beaten. Where are you? He asked. I am staying with a friend. I said, I have been thinking about what you said at the pier, about protecting the family. There was a pause. I could hear him exhale, a long, ragged sound of relief. I'm glad to hear that. Claire, I really am. I do not want to fight you. Dad, I lied. I just want to understand. If I am going to walk away, If I am going to let this go, I need closure. Do you remember the financial planning binder? The one you always said you would walk me through? I remembered it vividly, a thick navy blue binder he kept in his study. He used to point to it and say, "When I am gone, everything you need is in there." "I remember," he said cautiously. "I need to see it." I said, "I need to see the numbers. If the situation is as bad as you say, show me. Treat me like an adult, and I will respect your decision. But I cannot do it blindly." He hesitated. I imagined him weighing the risk. Showing me the books meant exposing the mess, but refusing me meant risking a public scene. "Okay," he said finally. "But not at the house. She is very stressed. Meet me at the park." I said, "The one by the marina." In an hour, the park was empty, save for a few joggers fighting the wind. I sat on a bench facing the water, my coat pulled tight against the chill. I saw my father's car pull into the lot. He walked toward me, clutching a manila folder. Not the navy binder. He sat down on the opposite end of the bench, leaving a foot of wooden slats between us. "Here," he said, sliding the folder across the gap. "This is the overview." I opened it. My heart beat a steady, slow rhythm against my ribs. I looked at the papers. They were photocopies, and they were a mess. The page numbers jumped. I saw page 2, then page 5, then page 9. The dates in the headers had been obscured, either by a thumb over the copier lens or a deliberate fold. There were spreadsheets with columns blacked out. It was a curated reality, a lie made of paper. "I see," I said softly, turning the pages. "The debt is significant, Claire," my father said, leaning forward, his eyes searching my face for signs of acquiescence. The market turned on Toby. We were overextended. I stopped at a page that looked like a loan agreement. It was missing the signature block, but the terms were visible. "Accelerated repayment clause," I read. "Full balance due immediately upon breach of occupancy covenants." Occupancy covenants. That was the gun to his head. The loan explicitly stated that the property had to be vacant. If the lender found out I was living there, the loan would be called. My father would have to pay back $300,000 instantly, money he did not have. "So the lender believes the house is empty?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "It is a requirement for the asset class," he said vaguely. "It is just a technicality." "And when is the presentation?" I asked, pointing to a date highlighted on a timeline. "Lender final review. Tomorrow," he said. That is why everything had to happen so fast." I nodded. I turned another page. I saw a document titled Asset Disposition Strategy. It listed the house value, the potential sale price, and the net proceeds. But something was wrong with the math. The net proceeds were calculated based on a sale price that was 20% below market value. I looked closer. The buyer wasn't listed as open market. It was listed as prearranged transfer. They weren't selling the house on the open market. They were handing it over to a specific entity. "I need to get some water," my father said, standing up abruptly. "My throat is dry. There's a fountain over there." "Go ahead," I said, the moment he turned his back. I pulled my phone from my sleeve. I had set the camera to silent mode before he arrived. I flipped the pages rapidly. Click, click, click. I photographed the occupancy clause. I photographed the prearranged transfer line. I photographed a page he had buried at the back, a list of outstanding liabilities that included the North Star Holdings debt. I saw something else on the liability list. Contractor lien. Apex Solutions. A lien? How could a fake contractor have a lien on the house? My father turned back around. I slid the phone into my pocket and smoothed the paper down. "I understand now." "Dad," I said as he sat back down, "I really do. You are in a hole." "I am," he said, his voice cracking. "I am trying to climb out." I closed the folder and handed it back to him. "I will stay out of your way tomorrow." I said, "I will let the inspection happen. Thank you." "Claire," he said. He looked like he wanted to hug me, but he didn't dare. "You are saving us." I watched him walk away. He thought he had won. He thought he had pacified the hysterical daughter with a few selectively edited spreadsheets. He had no idea he had just handed me the map to his own destruction. I drove straight to the library again. It was my war room now. I found a secluded carrel in the back and uploaded the photos to my secure cloud storage. I zoomed in on the contractor lien line. Apex Solutions. Amount: $45,000. Date filed: December 1st. A lien meant the contractor claimed they had done work and hadn't been paid. But Apex Solutions was a shell company. It didn't exist. Why would my father, or Eleanor, file a fake lien against their own house? I searched for reasons to file a fake mechanic's lien. The results were illuminating: equity stripping, protecting assets from other creditors, lowering the apparent value of a property for transfer. If there was a $45,000 lien on the house, the equity looked lower. It made the house less attractive to other creditors. Or it allowed the pre-arranged buyer to purchase the house for less, arguing they had to assume the debt. It was fraud. Layer upon layer of it. I needed to know more about this contractor. I had the name Apex Solutions, but I needed a face. I called the number for the County Contractor Licensing Board. I didn't expect much, but I got a board clerk on the line. "Hi," I said. "I am looking up a license for a company called Apex Solutions. I am thinking of hiring them, but I can't find their license number on the quote." "Hold on," the clerk said. I heard the clacking of keys. "I am not seeing an Apex Solutions," she said. "That is what I was afraid of." I said, "They are doing work on my neighbor's house. 14 Oak Street." "Wait," she said. 14 Oak? We had a call about that address a few months ago. Not Apex, though. It was a complaint about unlicensed staging work. Staging work? Yeah. Someone reported that a crew was doing structural work, moving walls, but calling it staging to avoid permits. The inspector went out there, but no one answered the door. "Do you have the name of the person who called in the complaint?" I asked. "I can't give you that." She said, "Privacy policy." "Okay," I said. "Can you tell me if the complaint mentioned a specific person running the crew?" The notes say, let me see. The caller mentioned a Mr. Vance. Vance. I thanked her and hung up. I went back to the search bar. Vance Contractor Bayport. Nothing. Vantage Property Management, the company Eleanor had approved at the board meeting. I searched Vantage Property Management again. I looked for the registered agent. Samuel Vance. There was the connection. Eleanor used her position on the board to fast-track Vantage. Vantage was likely operating as Apex, and Samuel Vance was the man behind the curtain. My phone buzzed. It was Maya. "I have a friend who wants to talk to you. Mark. He writes for the City Chronicle. Meet him at the Rusty Anchor at 6. The Rusty Anchor was a dive bar by the docks, the kind of place where fishermen drank away their paychecks and tourists were scared to enter. I walked in at 6 sharp. Mark was sitting in a booth in the back. He looked exactly like a journalist was supposed to look. Disheveled hair, a tweed jacket that had seen better days, and eyes that were sharp and cynical. "You are Claire?" he asked. I sat down. Maya says you have a story. I have a fraud ring. I said, I have a community board member, a shell company contractor, and a predatory lender working together to strip equity from families. And my father is their latest mark. Mark took a sip of his beer. That is a lot of buzzwords. Do you have proof? I pulled out my phone. I showed him the photo of the permit. I showed him the photo of the lien. I showed him the minutes from the board meeting. He scrolled through them, his expression unchanging. "This Vantage Group," he said, tapping the screen. "I have heard of them. They buy distressed properties, usually from probate or foreclosure. My house isn't in foreclosure." I said, "Not yet," Mark said. "But if they have a bridge loan with an acceleration clause and a fake lien to eat up the equity, they are manufacturing a foreclosure. They are setting it up so they can take the deed in lieu of payment. It is a bust-out scheme." "What triggers an inquiry?" I asked. "What makes this a story you can print?" He looked at me. "Conflict of interest. That is the gold standard. If your stepmother is on the board that approves the permits for the company that is stripping the equity, that is public corruption. That is page 1. I have the minutes." I said, "It is not enough," he said. "You need to show collusion. You need to show they are working together. Right now, it is just coincidental. You need them in the same room, acknowledging the deal." I nodded. I knew exactly where to find them. The Bayport Community Association met on the first and third Thursdays of the month. Today was Thursday. The meeting was held in the basement of the library. I slipped in the back door just as the meeting was called to order. There were about 30 people there. Concerned citizens, local busybodies, and a few bored city officials. Eleanor sat at the front table. She looked regal in a navy blazer, her hands folded on the table. She was the picture of civic virtue. I sat in the back row, pulling my scarf up to cover the lower half of my face. The agenda moved slowly. Potholes, streetlights, then, Item 5, Neighborhood Standards and Preservation. Eleanor took the microphone. "We have seen an increase in distressed properties in our district," she began. Her voice was smooth, practiced. "It is vital that we maintain our property values. We need to encourage rapid rehabilitation of these homes. That is why the board has been working with select partners to facilitate quick turnarounds on renovations." She was talking about my house. She was talking about erasing me. I scanned the audience. I was looking for Samuel Vance. I didn't know what he looked like, but I looked for the man who didn't fit, the man who wasn't a neighbor. I saw him in the third row. He was wearing a leather jacket and heavy boots. He wasn't taking notes. He was watching Eleanor with a look of bored familiarity. When Eleanor finished speaking, she looked directly at him. It was brief, a subtle nod, a tightening of the lips. He nodded back, a small, almost imperceptible dip of the chin. It was the signal. "We are on track." I raised my phone, hiding it behind the shoulder of the man in front of me. I snapped a photo of the back of his head, capturing Eleanor in the background. Looking at him, I needed his face. The meeting adjourned. The man in the leather jacket stood up. He didn't mingle. He walked straight for the side exit. I followed him. He walked out into the cool night air. I hung back, staying in the shadows of the library entrance. He pulled out a pack of cigarettes and lit one. He leaned against a black pickup truck. I zoomed in with my camera. I got his profile, the heavy brow, the scar on his chin. Then, his phone rang. He put it to his ear. "Yeah," he said. His voice was gravelly. "Yeah, the walkthrough is set. 8 a.m. Pause. Don't worry about the girl," he said. "We handled it. She's gone." My breath caught in my throat. "The girl." "Yeah," Vance said. The old man signed the affidavit. "She was out months ago. Clean break." He laughed. A harsh sound. "Yeah. See you tomorrow." He hung up and got into the truck. I watched his taillights fade. The old man signed the affidavit. My father. I sat in my car in the library parking lot. I felt numb. Toby had called me while I was in the meeting. I saw the missed call notification. I called him back. "Claire?" He sounded breathless. "Where are you?" I asked. "I am at the office." "Claire, stop digging." "What?" "A guy called me. Just now. He knew where you work. He knew you drive a silver Honda. He said, 'Tell your sister to take a vacation.'" I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. "Who was it? Toby?" "I don't know. He blocked his number, but he said if you show up at the house tomorrow, things are going to get complicated for me." "For you?" I asked. "Not for us?" "He owes them money, too. Claire, I think the lender is connected to the people Dad owes. It is all the same circle. Please, just stay away tomorrow. I can't do that." "Toby, why? Just let them have the house." "It is just a house." "It is not just a house," I said quietly. "It is the truth." I hung up. I looked at the photos I had taken of my father's curated folder. I zoomed in on the last page I had photographed, the one I had barely glanced at in the park. It was a document titled Affidavit of Occupancy Status. It was dated 3 days ago. I, Robert Ward, homeowner, hereby certify under penalty of perjury that the property is currently vacant and has been vacant since October 1st, 2025. All former occupants have voluntarily relinquished residency and removed all personal property. It was signed Robert Ward, and below it, A witness signature. Eleanor Ward. They had signed it. My father had put his name on a legal document stating I had moved out 3 months ago. That was the clean break Vance had mentioned. If I showed up tomorrow, I wouldn't just be an evicted daughter, I would be a trespasser, a liar, a woman contradicting a sworn affidavit signed by the property owner. My father hadn't just erased my future in that house. He had erased my past. He had rewritten the last 3 months of my life to serve his debt. I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was the calm of the soldier who realizes there is no retreat. I had the photos. I had the audio recording. I had the mail. I had the connection between Eleanor and Vance. I started the engine. I wasn't going to go to work tomorrow. I wasn't going to hide at Maya's. I drove to a 24-hour copy shop. I printed everything: the permit, the email draft about my instability, the text messages, the photo of the affidavit, the photo of Vance and Eleanor. I made 3 copies, one set for Mark, the journalist, one set for the police, and one set for the lender. I bought a fresh burner phone at the convenience store next door. I transferred my audio recordings to a secure cloud drive and emailed the link to Maya with the subject line. If anything happens to me, I changed my routine. I didn't go to Maya's house. I drove to a motel 2 towns over, paid cash for a room, and parked my car around the back where it couldn't be seen from the road. I sat on the lumpy mattress, staring at the stack of papers. My father had signed that affidavit to save himself. He had sacrificed me to the wolves of finance to keep his own secrets buried. Tomorrow, at 8 a.m., I was going to unbury them, all of them. I set the alarm on my phone for 6 a.m. The house needed to look right by morning. I was going to make sure it looked exactly like what it was: a crime scene. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, surrounded by a paper city of my own making. The cheap polyester duvet was covered in photocopies, timelines, and sticky notes. It was 4 p.m. The lender walkthrough, the deadline my father was so terrified of, was 16 hours away. I had spent the morning constructing a timeline that connected the sins of the past to the crisis of the present. It was an ugly, jagged line. 2021. My father asks me to co-sign a utility waiver. In reality, it was a liability acceptance for North Star Holdings, a debt collection firm. 2025. October. My mother's legacy account, which was supposed to be dormant, suddenly goes active. $50,000 is drained over 4 months. December 1st. A lien is filed against the house by Apex Solutions, a company that does not exist, for $45,000. December 21st. Eleanor files a permit for staging renovations using that same fake company. December 23rd. I am evicted. The narrative was clear. My father had not just borrowed money. He had built a financial house of cards using my identity and my mother's ghost as structural support. And now, to keep the wind from blowing it down, he had to sacrifice me. I could have gone to the police. I could have gone to the journalist. Mark, immediately. But I needed them in a room. I needed to see their faces when the lies stopped working. I had called my father at noon. I told him I had the bank records. I told him I knew about the affidavit. I gave him a choice: meet me with a neutral mediator at 5 o'clock to discuss a settlement, or I would walk into the police station and file charges for identity theft before dinner. He had agreed. The fear in his voice was palpable. I packed the papers into a stiff leather portfolio. I checked my appearance in the motel mirror. I looked tired. Yes, but I also looked dangerous. I was no longer the daughter in pajamas being told what to do. I was the plaintiff. The mediation center was a quiet suite of offices downtown, neutral ground often used for divorce settlements and contract disputes. I had hired a mediator named Mr. Clark, a retired judge with a reputation for cutting through nonsense. I arrived first. I sat at one side of the long mahogany table. My portfolio closed in front of me. They arrived together. My father looked haggard, his suit rumpled. Eleanor was dressed in black, her face a mask of pinched disapproval. Toby trailed behind them, looking like he might vomit. They sat opposite me. Mr. Clark sat at the head of the table. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice." "Mr. Clark said, his voice gravelly and calm. "Ms. Ward has requested this session to resolve a dispute regarding residency and property access at the Oak Street residence. The goal is to avoid litigation." Eleanor spoke first. "This is ridiculous. There is no dispute. Claire moved out months ago. We are simply preparing the house for a financial transaction. This is harassment." I did not look at her. I looked at Mr. Clark. "I did not move out months ago." I said clearly, "I was evicted by force at 2 a.m. 2 days ago, and I have evidence that my residency was not only active but deliberately concealed." I opened my portfolio. I took out the stack of intercepted mail. I slid it across the table. "This is my mail." I said, "Some of it is dated from October and November. It was found in a kitchen drawer, hidden beneath a false bottom." My father reached for the envelopes. His hand shook. "It is a federal crime to intercept mail." I said, "But what is more interesting is why it was intercepted." I pointed to the envelope from the bank. "The delinquency notice on my mother's account. You hid this because you didn't want me to know that you had reactivated Mom's account." I said, "You didn't want me to know that you were draining it to pay North Star Holdings." My father flinched as if I had slapped him. Eleanor stiffened. "That account was a family resource," Eleanor said, her voice sharp. "Your father has the right to manage family assets. He does not have the right to forge my consent on a liability waiver." I countered. "And he does not have the right to claim I abandoned the property when I was sleeping in my bedroom every night." I pulled out the photograph of the affidavit, the one my father had signed, the one Eleanor had witnessed. "I hereby certify that the property is currently vacant and has been vacant since October 1st. I looked at my father. "You signed this 3 days ago." "Dad, while I was eating breakfast in the kitchen, you swore under penalty of perjury that I wasn't there." "I had to," my father burst out. He slammed his hand on the table, the sound echoing in the quiet room. "You don't understand the pressure. Claire, the lender required a clean title. They required vacancy." "Why?" I asked. It was the question I had been asking myself for 48 hours. Why does a lender care if your daughter lives in the spare room? A standard mortgage doesn't care. A refinance doesn't care. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Eleanor. Mr. Clark leaned forward. "Mr. Ward, that is a valid question. Vacancy requirements are typically associated with commercial flipping or distressed asset liquidation. It is a bridge loan," Toby said. His voice was small, coming from the end of the table. I turned to my brother. "A bridge loan doesn't require me to be invisible. Toby, it just requires equity. Unless the bridge loan isn't really a loan." Toby looked at me, his eyes wide and wet. "It was the deal." "Claire, what deal?" "The private deal," he blurted out. "The house wasn't just collateral. It was the purchase price." "Toby," Eleanor hissed. But he didn't stop. The words were tumbling out of him, driven by the guilt that had been eating him alive. "The lender is North Star," Toby said, his voice rising to a panic. "They are the same people. Dad owes them so much money. They agreed to wipe the debt if we handed over the house, but they wanted it as a clean asset transfer, not a foreclosure. They wanted to flip it immediately. They said if there were any tenants, any legal encumbrances, the deal was off, and they would sue us for the full amount plus interest." I sat back, the air leaving my lungs. It wasn't a refinance. It wasn't a sale to a stranger. It was a surrender. My father was handing the family home, my mother's home, directly to the loan sharks to settle his gambling debts or his bad investments. And because I lived there, because I had tenant rights, I was a legal encumbrance. I was the wrench in the gears of the machine that was coming to eat them. "So you erased me," I said softly, "to make the transfer smooth." "We didn't have a choice," my father whispered. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "They were going to take everything. This way. This way we settle the debt. We walk away clean." "Clean?" I asked. "You committed perjury. You committed fraud. You committed identity theft." I turned to the mediator. "I am not done." I pulled out the next document, the printout of the permit. You claim you hired Apex Solutions to stage the house. I said, you filed a lien for $45,000 to lower the home's equity, making the transfer to North Star look legitimate on paper. I looked at Eleanor. But Apex Solutions doesn't exist. Eleanor's face went white. Her composure, usually so impenetrable, cracked. Her mouth worked, but no sound came out. I visited the address on the permit. I continued. 4500 Commerce Way, Suite 102. It is a mailbox rental store. I slid the photo of the storefront across the table. And do you know who else operates out of Suite 102? I asked. Vantage Property Management. The company you, Eleanor, fast-tracked for approval at the community board meeting last month. Mr. Clark picked up the photo. He looked at the permit. He looked at Eleanor. Mrs. Ward, he said, his voice dropping to a warning tone. Are you a member of the board that approved this permit? I recuse myself, Eleanor snapped, her voice high and defensive. I didn't sign the final approval, but you facilitated it. I said, you knew Apex was a shell. You knew the contractor was fake. You helped set up the mechanism to strip the equity from the house so North Star could take it without raising red flags. I am protecting my husband, Eleanor shouted. She stood up, her chair scraping violently against the floor. You ungrateful girl. We are trying to save your brother from bankruptcy. We are trying to keep your father out of jail. And you thought putting me on the street was the way to do it? I asked. We thought you would understand, she screamed. We thought you would help. By disappearing? I asked. By letting you paint me as unstable? I pulled out the final piece of paper, the email draft, disclosure regarding occupant C, Ward, instability, delusional episodes. You weren't just going to kick me out, I said, my voice cold. You were going to destroy my reputation. You were going to tell the lender I was crazy so that if I tried to speak up, no one would believe me. The room went silent. The hum of the ventilation system seemed deafening. My father looked at the email draft. He looked at Eleanor. You wrote that? He asked her. She didn't answer. She stood there, breathing hard, her chest heaving. Mr. Clark closed his folder. I am pausing this session, he said firmly. Why? Eleanor demanded. Because, Mr. Clark said, looking at her over the rim of his glasses, this is no longer a mediation regarding property access. This has entered the realm of criminal fraud and conspiracy. I cannot preside over this. I strongly advise all of you to seek separate legal counsel immediately. He stood up. I am terminating this meeting. My father looked at me. For the first time, I saw the true depth of the emotion in his eyes. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even guilt anymore. It was terror. He realized, in that quiet conference room, that the story he had been telling himself, that he was the hero making a hard sacrifice, had collapsed. He was not the hero. He was the villain, and he was caught. Claire, he whispered, please. I stood up. I gathered my papers. I put them back in the portfolio. The walkthrough is tomorrow at 8, I said. My father nodded. Mute. I will be there, I said. I walked out of the room. I didn't look back. I heard Toby sobbing. I heard Eleanor arguing with Mr. Clark, but I kept walking until I hit the cool evening air of the street. I drove back to the motel. The sun had set, and the neon sign of the motel buzzed with a dying, flickering light. I felt drained, hollowed out. I had won the skirmish, but the war was still waiting for me in the morning. I unlocked the door to my room and threw the portfolio on the bed. My burner phone buzzed. I froze. No one had that number except Mark, the journalist, and Maya. I picked it up. It was a text message from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a photograph. I stared at the small, glowing screen, my blood turning to ice. It was a picture of my bedroom, my old bedroom, the one in the house. But it wasn't the empty, staged room I had seen during the civil standby. Someone had brought in a single chair, a wooden chair, placed right in the center of the room, facing the window, and on the chair sat a single object, my old teddy bear, the one I had kept since I was 3, the one I had thought was lost in the clutter boxes. The bear had been ripped open. The stuffing was spilling out onto the seat of the chair. Below the image was a caption. "This is how it needs to look." I dropped the phone on the bed as if it were burning. They were inside the house. Right now. It wasn't my father. My father was at the mediation center. Or driving home. It wasn't Eleanor. It was them. North Star. Vantage. The men in the van. This is how it needs to look. It was a threat. A direct, violent message. They were telling me that they had access to my most personal space. They were telling me that they knew I was watching. And they were watching back. They were telling me that if I interfered with the look of the house tomorrow, I would end up like the bear. I backed away from the bed. I checked the lock on the motel door. It was a flimsy chain. It felt like nothing. I realized then that my father's panic wasn't just about money. He wasn't just afraid of bankruptcy. He was afraid of these people. He had gotten into bed with wolves, and now the wolves were in his house. The outside pressure wasn't abstract. It was operational. It was coordinated. I paced the small room. My hands were shaking. I wanted to run. I wanted to get in my car and drive until I hit the state line. I wanted to call the police and scream for help. But if I called the police now, what would they do? They would take a report. They might drive by the house. But they wouldn't stop the deal tomorrow. They wouldn't understand the intricate web of shell companies and affidavits in time. And by the time they figured it out, the house would be gone. The transfer would be complete. The evidence would be buried under a new deed. I stopped pacing. I looked at the phone on the bed. This is how it needs to look. They wanted silence. They wanted fear. I picked up the phone. I didn't delete the message. I took a screenshot of it. I saved it to the cloud. Then I called Mark. He answered on the first ring. "Did you get the files?" I asked. "I did." Mark said. His voice was grim. "Claire, this is big. The lien, the permit." I ran the names. Samuel Vance has a record 2 states over for intimidation and fraud. He just sent me a death threat. I said, or close enough to one. "Are you safe?" "I am in a motel. I am fine." Mark, "Can you be there tomorrow?" "At the house?" "Yes, 8 a.m. I will be there," he said. "I will bring a photographer." "No." I said, "Don't bring a photographer. Bring a witness. Bring someone who knows city code. I have a contact in the zoning office." Mark said, "He owes me a favor." "Bring him." I hung up. I sat down at the small desk in the corner of the room. I opened my laptop. I had one more card to play. The trap. The lender walkthrough was scheduled for 8 in the morning. That meant the representative from North Star, or whoever they were pretending to be, would be there to verify the asset. I needed to make sure that verification failed. I needed to make sure that the moment they stepped foot on the property became radioactive. I navigated to the city's online portal. I didn't file a police report. Police reports could be ignored or delayed. Instead, I filed a request for emergency code enforcement. Reason for complaint: suspected structural instability due to unpermitted load-bearing modifications masked as cosmetic staging. Evidence: attached permit 2025-449. Fraudulent, and witness affidavit regarding removal of support beams. I attached the photo of the staging work I had taken from the street, the van, the materials, and I attached a statement I wrote right then and there, claiming I had heard cracking sounds during the night of the eviction. It was a lie, but a necessary one. Structural instability was the one thing that forced an immediate stop work order. It was the one thing that required the city to send an inspector immediately. I hit submit. Then I navigated to the county recorder's office portal. I filed a lis pendens. A lis pendens is a formal notice that a lawsuit is pending concerning a property. It effectively freezes the title. No lender in the world, not even a hard money shark, will touch a property with an active lis pendens because it means the ownership is in dispute. I uploaded the draft of the lawsuit I hadn't filed yet. Claire Ward vs. Robert Ward et al. Wrongful eviction and fraudulent conveyance. I paid the filing fee with my credit card. Processing. Submission received. Time stamped. 11:42 p.m. I sat back. The trap was set. At 8 a.m., The lender would arrive expecting a pristine, vacant asset. At 8:05, the city inspector would arrive to investigate a collapsing structure, and when the lender tried to run the title check one last time before funding, they would see the list pendants flashing like a red strobe light. I turned off the light. I didn't sleep. I sat in the chair by the window, watching the parking lot, clutching the burner phone. "You want to erase me?" I whispered to the dark. "You want the house to look right? I am going to make sure it looks like exactly what it is, a trap." The morning did not break. It simply turned from black to a dull, bruised gray. The fog had rolled in off the ocean, thick and wet, blanketing the town of Bayport in a suffocating mist. It was the kind of weather that dampened sound and blurred edges, making the world feel like a dream or a nightmare. I was not at the house. To be at the house would be a mistake. If I stood in the driveway, screaming and waving papers, I would look exactly like the unstable, hysterical woman my stepmother had described in her email draft. I would be a problem to be removed by security. Instead, I was parked in the lot of the Municipal Services Building. 3 miles away, my dashboard clock read 7:50 in the morning. I had the engine running, the heater blasting against the damp chill. On the passenger seat, my laptop was open, tethered to my phone's hotspot. I was logged into the city's public portal, hitting refresh every 30 seconds. The status of permit 2025-449 changed at exactly 7:52. The green text that had read active flickered and turned to a bold, angry red. Suspended. Emergency review. I let out a breath I'd been holding since midnight. The trap had sprung. My late-night filing of the code violation, citing structural instability and unpermitted load-bearing modifications, had triggered an automatic flag in the system. No inspector had gone out yet, but the computer brain of the city had done its job. It froze the permit, and because the permit was tied to the property address, the list pendants I had filed with the county recorder would now be visible to anyone running a title check this morning. I watched the screen. A new notification popped up. System alert. Notice of violation generated. Inspector dispatched. I closed the laptop. I put the car in gear. Now, I could go to the house. Not as a trespasser, but as a witness. My phone began to ring as I turned onto the main avenue leading to my childhood neighborhood. It was my father. I let it ring. It rang again immediately. Then a text. "Claire, answer me." "Claire, what did you do?" "Please, I drove the speed limit. I did not rush." The lender walkthrough was scheduled for a window between 8 and 10. I knew exactly how these private equity firms worked. Punctuality was their religion. They would be there at 8 sharp to verify the asset before wiring the funds. When I turned onto Oak Street, the scene was surreal. The house looked beautiful. The landscaping was manicured. The windows were gleaming, and the freshly painted front door shone in the misty light. It looked like the American dream. But parked in the driveway was my father's sedan, the trunk open as if he were ready to flee, and standing on the front lawn, huddled together like mourners at a graveside service, were my father, Eleanor, and Toby. And there was another car. A black luxury SUV was idling at the curb. The windows were tinted dark, impenetrable. I pulled my beat-up car up to the opposite side of the street, 2 houses down. I killed the engine. I did not get out immediately. I watched. My father was on his phone, pacing frantically in a tight circle on the grass. He was gesturing wildly, his face a mask of panic. Eleanor stood rigid. Her arms crossed so tightly across her chest, she looked like she was holding herself together with physical force. Toby was sitting on the front steps, his head in his hands. The driver's door of the black SUV opened. A man stepped out. He was not a contractor. He was not a banker in a soft suit. He was dressed in a sharp, dark charcoal suit that looked expensive and severe. He checked his watch. He looked at the house. Then he looked at his phone. He frowned. He tapped the screen of his phone, likely refreshing the title report or the permit status one last time before entering the property. I saw the moment he saw it. He stopped walking. He looked up from the phone. staring directly at my father. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, the way a predator looks when the prey slips into a hole. He turned around, got back into the SUV, and closed the door. My father ran toward the car. He actually ran, stumbling over his own feet, reaching out as if to grab the door handle. "Wait." I could hear his voice cracking even from across the street. "Just wait. It is a mistake. It is a glitch." The SUV did not wait. The engine revved, a low, powerful purr, and the vehicle pulled away from the curb, sliding smoothly into the fog. My father stood in the street, watching it go. He looked small. He looked broken. I opened my car door and stepped out. The sound of my door slamming was like a gunshot in the quiet morning. All three of them turned to look at me. "Claire." My father said my name like it was a curse. He walked toward me, his face blotchy and red, his eyes wild. He stopped at the edge of the lawn, breathing hard. "You did this," he rasped. "You filed the complaint. The city just emailed me. A structural violation? Structural instability?" I walked toward him, stopping on the sidewalk. I stayed on public property. I heard cracking sounds. "Dad," I said, my voice calm and caring in the damp air. I was concerned about the safety of the house. I thought it was my civic duty to report it. "You lied," he shouted. "There is nothing wrong with the structure. You did it to kill the deal." "I did it to pause the deal," I corrected, "because you were about to sell a house that isn't yours to sell." "It is my house," he screamed, veins bulging in his neck. "I paid for it. I worked for 40 years for this house. And you were giving it away to a loan shark." I said. He froze. "I know who North Star is, Dad. I know about the bridge loan that isn't really a loan. I know about the accelerated repayment clause. You weren't selling the house. You were surrendering it." He looked around, terrified that the neighbors might hear. But the fog hid us. We were alone in a gray room of our own making. "I had to," he whispered. His rage collapsed into misery in an instant. They were going to seize it. "Claire, they were going to take the pension. They were going to come after Toby. I was trying to stop the bleeding. By cutting my throat?" I asked. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," he pleaded. "I was going to make it right. I just needed the money to clear. Once the transfer happened, the debt would be gone. I would have helped you get an apartment. I would have given you cash." "Cash from where?" I asked. "From the next loan? From the next lie?" He didn't answer. He looked at the ground. I walked past him. I walked up the slate path toward the house. Eleanor blocked my way. She stood on the bottom step, looking down at me. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, but her eyes were venomous. She had lost the mask of the polite stepmother. This was the woman who had drafted the email calling me unstable. "You ruin everything," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you have done? That man, he wasn't a bank teller. Claire, he represents people who do not file lawsuits. They settle things differently." "I know." I said. "He sent me a picture of my teddy bear ripped apart." Eleanor blinked. She hadn't known about that. I saw the flicker of surprise. I stepped closer to her. I wanted to see her eyes. I wanted to see the soul of the woman who had tried to erase me. "Why, Eleanor?" I asked. "Not the money. I get the money. Greed is simple. But why the erasure? Why did you need to wipe me out of the history of this family? Why did you intercept my mail? Why did you strip my room?" She sneered. "Because you are a liability. Claire, you have always been a liability. You are 33 years old and living in your childhood bedroom. You are a failure. Is that it?" I asked. "Or is it because I am the only one who remembers?" "Remembers what?" She spat. "Remembers where the money actually came from." I reached into my bag and pulled out the file I had reconstructed yesterday. The timeline of the legacy account. I held up the bank statement for my mother's old business account, the one ending in 4490. "This account," I said, "the one you told me was empty, the one you told me was closed." Eleanor went still. "It wasn't empty, was it?" I asked. "Mom left it for me. She told me before she died." She said, "Claire, there is a rainy day fund. Do not touch it unless you have to." I looked at my father, who had walked up behind me. "I never touched it." Dad, I thought you had closed it and moved the money to a trust. But you didn't. You kept it active, and for 5 years, you have been using it. I turned back to Eleanor. You didn't erase me because I was a tenant, I said. You erased me because I am the beneficiary. If the lender saw my name on the residency documents, they would have run a full background check. They would have seen my name on the legacy account, and they would have seen that the collateral for the loan, the cash reserves you showed them, was stolen from me. Eleanor's face crumpled. It wasn't sadness. It was the ugly, distorted look of a truth being dragged into the light. It was never meant for you, she shrieked. Her voice cracked, high and hysterical. It was family money. Martha was dead. What does a dead woman need with $50,000? We had bills. We had maintenance. We had a lifestyle to uphold. My mother worked for that money. I said, my voice shaking with a sudden, hot rage. She saved it penny by penny from her antique shop so I would have a safety net. And you spent it on, what, country club dues? A new car? And Toby? Eleanor shouted, pointing a shaking finger at my brother. We spent it on Toby. I turned to my brother. He was still sitting on the steps, looking like a ghost. Toby? I asked. He looked up. Tears were streaming down his face. I didn't know. Claire. He sobbed. I swear to God. Dad just gave me the checks. He said he had an investment mature. He gave me $20,000 for the land survey. He gave me $10,000 for the permits. I thought it was his money. I looked back at my father. You funded Toby's failure with Mom's legacy. I said, and when that ran out, you borrowed from the sharks. And when the sharks came calling, you sold the house. And when the house wasn't enough, you sold me. My father looked hollow. The wind seemed to blow right through him. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He just stood there, a man stripped of his myths. A car door slammed nearby. We all turned. The black SUV had not left. It had circled the block and parked 3 houses down, just watching. Now, the driver, the man in the charcoal suit, was walking toward us. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He walked with a calm, predatory grace. He stopped at the edge of the property line, respecting the legal boundary as if it were a physical wall. Mr. Ward, the man said. His voice was smooth, polite, and terrifying. My father flinched. Mr. Sterling, I can explain. The city. There is a misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding. Mr. Sterling said. He looked at the orange sticker the inspector would soon be slapping on the door. The asset is distressed. The title is clouded. The deal is void. Please, my father begged. Stepping forward, give me 24 hours. I can fix it. I can get the complaint withdrawn. Mr. Sterling ignored him. He turned his eyes to me. He looked me up and down, coolly assessing the threat. He knew exactly who I was. He knew I was the one who had filed the papers. Ms. Ward, he said, nodding slightly. You are very resourceful. I didn't answer. I held my ground. However, he continued, adjusting his cuffs, resourcefulness has consequences. Your father signed a contract. That contract has a default clause. Since the transfer of the asset failed today, the full balance of the bridge loan is due immediately. He looked back at my father. You have until 5 p.m., Robert, or we begin the seizure process, and we will be filing criminal charges for the falsified affidavit regarding the occupancy. He paused, letting the weight of that sink in. This situation will be resolved, he said softly, one way or another. He turned and walked back to the SUV. He got in. The car drove away. This time for good. The silence left behind was heavy enough to crush us. 5 p.m., my father whispered. He looked at his watch. It was 8:30 in the morning. He looked at the house he had tried so hard to save that he had destroyed his family to keep it. It was gone. He knew it. I knew it. Even Eleanor knew it. Toby stood up. He walked down the steps and stood in front of me. I am sorry. Claire, he said. He sounded like a child. I'm so sorry. I looked at him. I loved him. But I couldn't comfort him. Not now. Go home. Toby, I said, go to your wife. Tell her the truth before the sheriff comes to your door. He nodded, wiping his eyes, and walked to his truck. He drove away, leaving the three of us on the lawn. I turned to my father. He was staring at the spot where the SUV had been. Dad, I said. He didn't move. I took my phone out of my pocket. I swiped the screen. I found the audio file, the one from 2 nights ago, the one recorded at 2 a.m. I hit play. The sound was tinny but clear in the damp air. If we do not fix this tonight, we lose everything tomorrow. My father flinched at the sound of his own voice. I let it play to the end. Then I paused it. I walked up to him until I was standing 2 feet away. I forced him to look at me. Who is we, Dad? I asked. He looked at me. His eyes filled with a lifetime of regret. When you said, we lose everything, who did you mean? Did you mean the family? Did you mean me? Or did you mean you? He swallowed hard. He looked at Eleanor, who was staring at the ground, defeated. Then he looked at the house. Then he looked at the street, scanning the windows of the neighbors, afraid of who was listening, always afraid of the audience. I made promises I shouldn't have. He whispered. That was it. That was his defense. Not I loved you, not I'm sorry, just a weak admission of a bad deal. He couldn't say it. He couldn't admit that we meant I. He couldn't admit that he had been willing to burn my life to keep his own warm. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. I put the phone back in my pocket. I turned away from him. I turned away from the house with its fresh paint and its rotten core. Where are you going? Eleanor called out. Her voice was thin, desperate. You can't just leave. We have until 5 o'clock. You have to help us fix this. I didn't stop walking. I fixed it. Eleanor, I said over my shoulder. I stopped the lie. I sat in my car. The engine was cold now, through the windshield. I watched them. My father was sitting on the front steps, head in his hands, exactly where Toby had been. Eleanor was standing over him, gesturing, probably already planning the next maneuver, the next desperate attempt to spin the narrative. But it was over. The lis pendens was a scarlet letter on the property. No one would touch it. The lenders would come. The seizure would happen. The truth would come out in court filings and bankruptcy hearings. I looked at my phone. I had a draft email open. It was addressed to Mark, the journalist. Subject: the full story. Ward case. Attached to the email was everything: the audio recording, the photos of the curated financial documents, the timeline of the legacy account theft, the picture of the ripped teddy bear, the evidence linking Eleanor to the fake contractor. If I hit send, I would destroy them. It wouldn't just be a bankruptcy, it would be prison. It would be public humiliation on a massive scale. My father would die in jail. Eleanor would be pariah. Toby would never work in this town again. I held my thumb over the send button. I had won. I had proven I existed. I had stopped them from erasing me. But as I looked at my father, a small, broken man on the steps of a house he no longer owned, I realized that the revenge wasn't in the destruction. The revenge was in the truth. And I already had that. I looked at the email one last time. I could send it later. I could send it tomorrow. I could send it in 10 years. Or I could never send it, and let them live with the knowledge that I could. That I held the sword over their necks, and every day of freedom they had was a gift from the daughter they tried to delete. I lowered my thumb. I didn't hit send. I didn't delete the draft. I simply closed the phone. I put the car in gear. I took one last look at the house. It was just wood and stone. It wasn't home. It never really had been. I drove away into the fog, leaving them to the silence and to the clock ticking down to 5 p.m. Thank you for listening to this story. It is a heavy one. I know. Family betrayal leaves scars that no amount of revenge can fully heal. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from right now? Are you in a quiet room, a busy car, or maybe taking a walk to clear your head? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey into the darker side of family secrets, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. We have many more tales of justice, retribution, and the complicated human heart waiting for you. Share your thoughts on Claire's decision in the comments. Did she make the right choice by not hitting send? Until next time.